All right, so for example number 4, it says basically we're going to divide f by g, right? So this is not really new to us, but we're gonna take this and we're gonna divide it by this. That's what this means, right? That's what this means. I'm gonna take f and I'm gonna divide it by g. We're also asked to define or state the domain. Now remember, when we have a fraction, we're going to have some stuff on the top of the fraction, but the bottom cannot equal 0. So we cannot have a fraction with 0 in the denominator. So when we talk about the domain, we're going to have to think about what values of x will make the denominator equal 0. All right. So let's get started. So remember that when we do this, we're going to say f, which is f of x. That's our first function. Is divided by g, or g of x. F of x is divided by g of x. Okay? And so then on the next line, we're going to say 6x to the first power divided by g of x, which is x to the 3/4. Okay? Now, generally, what we got to do is, we know some x's on the top are going to cancel with some x's on the bottom. The weird thing is they're not whole numbers. We have fractions. So generally, first of all, what power is this x right here? What power is that raised to? Well, generally, we think of it as being raised to the first power, right? So then what I would do, the shortcut is, I would subtract 3/4 from here, and then I would subtract 3/4 from here. Well, what's 1 minus 3/4? Anybody know off the top of their head? Well, let's assume like you don't know it's 1/4. Remember that with fractions, when we add or subtract them, we need a common denominator. So isn't the whole number 1 the same as 4 over 4? Yep. So 4/4 minus 3/4 leaves us with 1/4. Okay. So then what do we put on the bottom here? Well, we're going to say that this is going to be 6 times x raised to the 1/4. And then what is 3/4 minus 3/4? Well, this just becomes 0, doesn't it? And then what is x to the 0 power? It's just 1. So our final answer is that f divided by g of x, and we'll write it down a second time down here, is just going to be 6x raised to the 1/4. And remember, that is 6 4th root of x. So now what do we know about the square roots? Well, I thought because this was a fraction that we can't have 0 in the denominator, but what's the other restriction on the domain? We also cannot take an even root, which is 4, that's an even number, right, of a negative number. So that means that my x value here has to be what we call a non-negative. In other words, my domain has to be x is greater than or equal to 0. It has to be that. Because I can't take the even root of a negative number. Lastly, before we forget, they want us to evaluate this at 16. So I'm going to have to say f of g, or f over g of x. Well, not of x. Actually, it's of 16, right? So wherever there's an x, I'm going to plug in 16. So then I'm going to say 6 fourth root of 16. And I'm pretty sure that 2 to the 4th power is equal to 16. How do I verify that? Handy dandy calculator. So I'm going to, I'm going to say 2 raised to the 4th power, yep, it equals 16. So these problems are kind of rigged up for us, right? So 2 to the 4th power is equal to 16. So then in my next line, I'm just going to say 6 times the 4th root of 2 to the 4. And what do the 4's do? Well, the 4th root kind of undoes the 4th power. And so on my next line, I've just got 6 times 2. So then f divided by g of 16 is equal to 6 times 2, or 12. In other words, if I graph this, I'm going to have a point 16, 12 on my graph. My x value and my corresponding y value. Alright, let's double check this, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my calculator, and let me show you how to do this. Turn on your calculators, go to y equals, clear all this out. And you'll want to do this now. Don't wait until the test to try to figure it out, because you'll put it in the calculator wrong. You'll get, the calculator will give you an answer. It just won't be correct. It'll give you an answer based on what you put into it. Alright? So we're going to say 6x, and this is the thing. You're going to put in parentheses the numerator, 6x, divided by, then again in parentheses, x raised to the 3 divided by 4. Like that. Okay? That's what you're going to put in your calculator. Okay? Then remember, we're going to put our composite function on the bottom. We said that our composite function was really 6 times x raised to the 1/4, or 1 divided by 4. So when I hit graph, I should see a blue graph. Well, you guys have the older calculators. You're just going to see a graph and then the other graph go right over the top of it. So, but on my screen, you'll see a blue line and then a red line. Ready? Actually, they're curves. Okay. And also, remember that we could look at the table of values, right? So if I go to second and then hit the graph button, see this word above the graph button that says table? Now I see the table of values. Now there's some issues here where we have an error, and I'll explain what that means. Oh, wait a second. Oh, we actually need to address that. Well, we'll talk about that later. So the last thing we want to know is what is the value of y when we plug. First of all, notice that all of the blue numbers equal the red numbers, right? So we did the composite function correctly. The only difference is right here. Remember, I can't have 0 in the denominator, so before I simplified everything, that original function we put in there, 0 makes the denominator equal 0, so that's an issue. But we're really looking at the red values because that's the composite function. Okay. So, anyways, we want to know what it is when you plug in 16. It should be 12, right? Ta-da! There it is. Any questions on that? Holy copy and paste, Batman. Any questions? All right, I'll leave